Monroe State College. Today we're going to take a tour through our General Science Lab in 204 in Science and Math. This lab space houses our General Biology Lab, our Zoology Lab, and our Botany Lab in the spring. So a couple of things before you come into lab. You are going to want to make sure to leave your food and drink in the hallway. You don't have to throw it away or get rid of it, but you can never be sure what was worked on in the lab before you were there. In zoology, we do dissections that use formalin as a preservative, and in general biology, we also do different experiments that use acids and bases, and it's just a regulation and a rule that we leave food and drink outside of the lab space. If any time during lab you do need to get up and get a drink or get a bite to eat, that is perfectly fine. You can come out, get your drink, and then leave it here in the hallway on the dedicated cart. Let's go ahead and go in and tour around our lab space. So today we're going to take a tour around 204 and talk about some of the equipment and features we have in this space and also some of the safety you should be aware of. So during the fall semester, you will need to sit in specific seats for social distancing. When you come into the lab, you'll notice on the edge of each table there is blue tape and there is orange tape. When you come into lab, your instructor will tell you to sit at either a blue or an orange seat. The blue and orange seats are offset, so the orange seat here, the next orange seat is at an angle behind, and the next orange seat is far away from this one, so students can be socially distanced. So please be sure to listen to instructions for which seat you need to go to with your instructor in your class. Also this semester, we will be having students wipe down their space after they use it, so there will be cleaners out for you to spray down the space, and there are paper towels available as well. We also use microscopes in lab quite frequently, and when we use microscopes, those will be set out for you, but to clean those, we'll have alcohol wipes set out at your station for you to wipe down the microscopes after use. This is for your safety and the safety of students that use the lab space after you do. Also be aware that there is hand sanitizer in the lab for you to use before leaving the space. Let's look at some of the other spaces you'll use in lab. So a couple of the things that we commonly use will be set out and ready and waiting for us. If something isn't set out and ready and waiting for us, it's probably over in the prep area. Let's go look at the prep area. So over on the west wall of the lab space, we have a large sink area for cleaning up materials. You also have hand soap, paper towels located in this area, and you are more than welcome to wash your hands before or after lab. We also have additional disinfectant for wiping down work areas. If there is not disinfectant at your seat when you come in, there's always extra disinfectant over in this area. Sometimes, like when we boil liver to check for what heat does to enzymes, we'll need to clean those test tubes out afterwards, at least give them a little rinse, and all of that will go down this large sink. Just be sure that when we are washing things out that you aren't congregating with other students, that you wash your materials out and then leave them in a dedicated space and move back to your workbench so that other students can come and use the cleanup area. We also have a small refrigerator here in our prep area. This will have a lot of our materials. You usually won't have to worry about getting anything out. Your instructor will take care of that before you need that material, but we do have this refrigerator here, and you'll see this quite often while you're working in lab. This space over along the west wall is our prep area, and you will be able to find materials you need to use for lab either at your workspace or out here on this cabinet. If you're collecting a material from this cabinet, You do need to make sure that you do that one at a time and that students aren't grouping together while you're coming up to get things. Notice that this bench space is mainly going to have general biology materials on it. The bench space at the back of the lab over here is marked as zoology, and this is where a lot of our zoology specimens are kept. So you may come to lab and all of the cabinets may have things on them. You do need to make sure that you're careful about the signage, that you're collecting things from the correct prep area. You'll also notice towards the back of the space we have several different biological specimens for you to enjoy. There are a number of skeletons, animal shells and remains. We also have several different living specimens, such as Stripes, our Nelson's milk snake, who is actually out and very active today. All of our snakes and specimens have large areas for them to live in. They have heat sources and moisture sources. We have ball pythons and different specimens for you to enjoy. However, do be careful. All of these are locked and secured, but we do appreciate that you enjoy the specimens without tapping or banging or frightening the specimens. So they are here for your enjoyment, and please just treat them with respect. We also have a couple of different fish tanks and tanks where we have our plant specimens like Alodia that we look at throughout the lab. Let's go and talk a little bit more about some safety features. So we do have a couple of safety items that you do need to be aware of throughout the course of the lab. We do occasionally work with hot plates and other sources that could potentially catch fire. So we do have a fire extinguisher in all of our labs. Fire extinguishers work on the principle of pass. So if there were to be a fire, you would need to first pull this pin. So there is a pin in the fire extinguisher to keep people from walking by and just squeezing it. So if you're going to use the fire extinguisher, you have to first pull the pin. Then you aim the nozzle at the base of the fire. You squeeze the trigger and you sweep back and forth. So if there ever was an emergency in lab, we do have a fire extinguisher to take care of that. Occasionally, we also look at slides that we make ourselves, and these have cover slips, small pieces of glass that we just dispose of at the end of the day. So once you are complete with your microscope work and you're cleaning up, there's usually a tank to throw your slides in, but you're just going to discard of your cover slips. Those do not go into the regular trash. They go into the small sharps bucket that's red and hard-sided to make sure that nobody is cut unwittingly with that sharp little piece of glass. So small glass can go here on this cart into the small sharps bucket. And a lot of times the small sharps bucket may actually be moved into the prep area if we know we're going to be doing a lot of slide work. Now occasionally, and it definitely happens, you may drop something that's glass and it might break. We have over 100 students coming through this lab every single week, and breakage is just a part of life. It's not anything to be worried about. You shouldn't be scared to tell anybody that you've gotten broken glass. That is just a part of having labs. There is a certain amount of breakage that occurs. We hope that you are careful and that we never have to clean anything up, but if we do, we just need to do so in a safe way. So, if you ever break any glass, you just need to let your instructor know. And we have a larger broken glass container for those kinds of accidents that happen. So, at the front of the classroom, you'll notice that there is a large red bucket. And the large red bucket is for large sharps and broken glass. And you can hear there's stuff in there because glass breaks. It gets old, it becomes more fragile, and this is just a part of lab life. The main thing is that you don't put that in the regular trash or put it somewhere where it could hurt somebody. if they didn't know that broken glass was there. So a couple of general rules when you're in any type of lab setting. So we do a lot of moving around, we work with samples, we work with microscopes, we work with glass, and so there are some rules just to keep us safe in general. So one of those rules is that you do need to wear closed-toed shoes when you come to lab. So just any type of tennis shoe or closed-toed shoe is very important in the lab setting. Also, if you have longer hair, it is important that that longer hair is kept up while you're in lab so that it doesn't possibly get tangled in any equipment, or when we're working with heat sources so that it doesn't possibly catch on fire. We also have to be sure that we listen to instructions. And so it is important that you not have in any earphones or earbuds or AirPods where you can't hear instructions from your instructor. Because that instruction may be, hey, you're fixing to knock the microscope off this bench. And if you can't hear that instruction, that could be a very costly mistake. So just a couple of things to keep us safe. We want to wear closed-toed shoes. We want to avoid eating or drinking in the lab, like we talked about when we first entered into the lab space. You can leave food and drink on that cart outside. We want to make sure that we tie our hair back up if we have longer hair, and we want to make sure that we don't have anything in that would keep us from hearing instructions, such as earphones or AirPods. So those are just a couple of general rules when it comes to lab safety and keeping yourself safe. A big part of what we want to become familiar with when we're in our introductory biology classes are microscopes. Microscopes are something that we use quite often in biology to look at samples that we can't see with our naked eye, either different types of cells from tissues or different microorganisms. Microscopes are a very useful tool. So all of our microscopes are located typically at the front of the classroom. Depending on the time that we have between classes, the microscopes may or may not be set out for you. But if we're using microscopes and they're not set out, you'll need to come up to this cabinet and get a microscope. So our microscopes are kept in this cabinet, and there are instructions on how you should care for the microscopes on the cabinets. So when you return microscopes, you should make sure that you've taken all the slides off. You should make sure that you've lowered the stage on that microscope, that you leave it on the smallest lens, the scanning lens, and that you remove the cord and wrap it separately from the scope. And then you want to make sure that you put the microscope in with its arm out and in the specific cubby that it is labeled for. So when we have our microscopes, you'll notice that there is a number on each cubby. Like this is 48, and that's 42, and that one down there is 54. On the back end of each microscope is a tape dot that has a corresponding number. So this is microscope 48, it goes into cubby 48, and it has its arm out when we store that. And that's so that if something does happen with this microscope, there's a piece missing or there's some other malfunction, the light bulb burns out, we know which microscope to go and service. So it is important that the microscopes are put back into the cubby that they came from. We do have a 1-to-1 student to microscope ratio. And especially this fall and into next spring, we're going to want to be very careful about doing one-to-one work. We won't be doing a lot of group work. Students will be doing tasks on their own. So for something like our microscopes, each student will have their own microscope. And so they're going to be doing their own microscope work when they're in lab. But we do have plenty of microscopes so that students can work in that one-to-one fashion. If your microscope isn't set out for you and you do need to come up to the cabinet to get it, just make sure that you come one at a time and that you keep that good social distancing and stay 6 feet back from the next student. We come in from this west side, get our microscopes, and move out towards the east.